Hello everyone friends. One time a Yakut businessman wrote an ironic post on calls for separatism of his people, for separation from Russia and war with it. Ukrainians are strongly recommending that we, the Yakuts, go to war against Russia. I have a question for the peoples who have already tried this. What are your reviews? Impressions? Did anyone actually enjoy it? Indeed, hardly anyone really liked it, as Russia always comes out the winner in the end. Its territory and great power status are proof of that. But nevertheless, those who have already tried war with Russia still do not stop and talk about new wars. First of all, we are talking about Europe. Although at the end of the last war with it, Russian troops occupied half of its territory, and before that even reached Paris. These are simple historical facts which should be kept in mind by those who are going to fight with Russia. Despite this, Europe is exploring ways to escalate the conflict by deploying more of its military forces closer to Russia's borders. Moreover, it imposes more and more sanctions, sacrificing its own economy. And here is the big question. Why? Obviously, Russia poses no threat to Europe. They selflessly claim that they want to help Ukraine out of the goodness of their heart is just hypocrisy. For centuries, Europe has been robbing and enslaving people. So humanism is out of the question here. And the main thing is, it is obvious that in times when Europe was somehow friendly with Russia, Europeans prospered. Even the EU's chief diplomat recognized this. So why did they start biting the hand that was feeding them? Yes, friends, there is something hidden from view here. Macron's repeated statements about sending troops to Ukraine can be seen as an Overton window, preparing the public for previously unacceptable measures. Unfortunately, sending tens of thousands of NATO troops to Ukraine is realistic. This fits into the US's favorable plan, where they appear uninvolved and profit from the war between Russia and Europe while staying out of it. Essentially, it's what already happened in World War I too. This is why Trump wants to pull the US out of NATO and says he will not defend allies. Secondly, and most importantly, Europe is ruled by ultra-globalist puppets who disregard their country's national interests. They defend the interests of a unipolar world where power is concentrated in transnational companies and the notorious masters of money. Globalists are those who want to run the show in a world with sovereign countries. Ultra-globalists are those who aim to erase national borders and racial differences, creating a unified world under a single central authority of some kind of world government. Ultra-globalists, they are the masters of money and owners of transnational companies, seized power in the US in the mid-80s and slowly began to carry out their globalization. That's why the European Union was created, to pile a lot of European countries together and conduct their experiments. Both of them, globalists and ultra-globalists, have their center in the United States. From there, the orders are given and the projects are financed. The fact that the United States Federal Reserve is sending trillions of dollars to European banks is open information that was made public during the audit of the Fed after the 2008 crisis. The collective West binds together this entire capital, the power of the dollar and euro. Such dominance of the masters of money is unlikely in a multipolar world, the construction of which Putin has unwillingly headed. Thus, for these ultra-globalists, Russia is the main enemy. That is why Germany and Europe do seemingly illogical things, killing their own economies and driving their own populations into poverty, fighting Russia. Here's a recent news as an example. Audi will cut 7.5 thousand jobs. Germany has always been famous for its industry, its cars, and they have always sold well, bringing money to both the country and its citizens. But the basis for Germany's industry has been taken out from underneath: cheap Russian gas, which affected the final price of the products. Volkswagen, Mercedes and BMW are struggling, but the German government still refuses to accept cheap Russian gas, even through the remaining Nord Stream pipeline. Why? Because they are appointees of those people who don't give a damn about Germany. It has to defend the interests of the unipolar American world. Once again, they do not care about their countries. They work for the major oligarchs of the planet. Among other things, the European Union started talking about militarization, going to allocate as much as $800 billion for armament. And by the way, the same faltering Volkswagen announced that it is ready to create military weapons. But against whom is all this being prepared? That is, this auntie, a gynecologist in the past who made billions from vaccine fraud, has decided to throw Europe into the furnace of war to please her masters. But just imagine for a second that Europe is going to and actually negotiating with Russia. Well, let's say back in 2014, when the Minsk agreements were signed and being implemented, and even Donetsk and Lugansk would have remained in Ukraine. They agreed on this, on the supply of cheap energy resources from Russia. And what would have happened to this region? It would have been really strong, self-sufficient and prosperous. There would be no war, no threats. For the Europeans, this is just a perfect scenario. However, for the US and ultra-globalists, such allies are dangerous and unnecessary. And so, to prevent this from happening in Europe, to prevent the emergence of nationally oriented strong leaders, this is why all these reforms on gender erasure, on multiculturalism, when migrants are brought in en masse, are being carried out. Many European leaders do not have children, so that they are not responsible to the future generation, and even do not think about building a strong state for their children. After all European leaders are flawed, uneducated, inadequate, even moronic. Because in a unipolar world, there should be no strong countries with intelligent leaders who will go against this very world order. There are only vassals of the ultra-globalists, and in every part of the world they are different. Australia, Japan, Israel. This is all to maintain a world order built on the rules of Western oligarchs. Russia totally challenged them in 2022, saying that it would be sovereign and would not tolerate NATO troops at its borders. The cudgel of the unipolar American world. And the world would no longer be unipolar. And Western politicians were ordered to stop Russia at any cost. Please note that no one in the West thinks about the reasons for the war. No one really wants to solve anything. It's just unjustified aggression. And now they have invented a 30-day truce. This proposal is absurd because Russia's official stance is that it will not tolerate an anti-Russian Ukraine, which is constantly being armed. That's why there was a preventive strike. And it will continue. The interests will be defended until the goals are achieved.
Demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine.
This has already been agreed upon in Istanbul. But then Boris Johnson flew to Zelensky and said that the fight should be continued. Why war? Because for the West, the problem is not that Russians and Ukrainians are dying, but the problem is that Russia is an enemy of the unipolar world. Within this framework, Europeans discussed sending peacemakers to Ukraine. Again, the question is, what kind of peacemakers? What are they for? Is it an attempt to start a war with Russia with NATO's main troops? If not, what will the so-called peacemakers do? How will they contribute to peace? Who will they be made up of? NATO troops? That is, the structure that is actually fighting against Russia. Why not call peacemakers from Iran, North Korea or China as an example? It's clear that NATO peacekeepers, once they enter Ukraine, will become part of the Ukrainian military and thus a target for destruction. That's what the Europeans want. Well, here Macron said that he would not ask Russia's permission for sending these peacemakers, to which he was rightly answered that Russia would not ask permission to kill them. The only reason it hasn't happened yet is, of course, nuclear weapons, which will get anyone in any part of the world. That's the trump card up Russia's sleeve that can't be beaten by any card. And yes, about Trump. Trump, as he has said many times, wants to make America great again. That is, the way it was after World War II. That is, before ultra-globalists came to power in America. He doesn't want to throw the United States into the furnace of the world's ultra-globalization revolution. He shuts down numerous projects and criticizes the US Federal Reserve, which has burdened America with massive debt. And apparently that's why they wanted to kill him. Yes, in that sense, he's also against the money owners. But Trump was still allowed to lead the country. So there are a lot of forces in the US that realize that the unipolar world has failed, and it is necessary to build something new. And where to get the funds to build something new? Yes, it is possible to make money on the war between Europe and Russia, as an example. But the plans of these Satanists will not come true. It's all about resources. Europe doesn't have any. And there are those $800 billion, which are necessary for its armament. But Russia can fight wars of attrition. This is very hard for the people, but unfortunately, no one gives us a choice. That's the way it is, friends.